In this video I want to take a look at indirect discrimination. Indirect discrimination is different from direct discrimination. It's a bit more subtle and it is a little more difficult to identify, but if I let you know what the definition is of indirect discrimination and then give you a couple of examples, I think the penny will drop fairly quickly and you'll see yourself what I mean by indirect discrimination and how it actually works in practice. So, indirect discrimination can happen when there are rules or arrangements that apply to a group of employees or job applicants, but in practice are less fair to a certain protected characteristic. The employee or applicant must be able to prove both of the following about the rule or arrangement. It's unfair to them and to others with the same protected characteristic. For example, a woman believes she's experiencing sex discrimination against women, and it's unfair compared with those who do not have the protected characteristic. For example, it's unfair to employees who are women but not to men. Indirect discrimination can be allowed if the employer can objectively justify it. Let me give you an example of indirect discrimination and you will, I think, be able to grasp it, and I'll go on then just to have a look at the definition in Irish law. Let's say a company advertises internally for a particular position. Let's say it's a top position, perhaps a sales manager job looking after the whole of Ireland. And let's say they confine this role, this advertisement, this job offer for competition to internal candidates, and let's say that all internal candidates for the role are men. Then that is an advertisement, a competition that would appear to be indirectly or discriminating against women, essentially on an indirect fashion. In other words, on the face of it, having an internal competition doesn't appear to be discriminatory. But when in fact the group of people who can apply from the internal pool are all men, then it's perhaps indirectly discriminatory of women. A second example I would give you would be if, for example, somebody advertised a job and they required, let's say, 10 years experience. It's quite conceivable that in that particular job the 10 years of experience would mitigate against and penalise young people. So there's a possibility of indirect discrimination on the grounds of age. And let me just take a look at the other definitions we have here. And if you have a look there in the Irish legislation, indirect discrimination on the gender ground occurs where an apparently neutral provision would put persons of a particular gender at a particular disadvantage in respect. So you'll see there from the Equality Act 2004 that Section 22 describes indirect discrimination as occurring where an apparently neutral provision puts persons of a particular gender at a particular disadvantage in respect of any matter other than remuneration compared with other employees of their employer. And the same situation exists and applies in relation to the other grounds of discrimination. You'll see there discrimination, indirect discrimination on the gender ground is where an apparently neutral provision would put persons of a particular gender at a particular disadvantage in respect of any matter, etc., etc. And the same applies across the other 8 grounds or 9 grounds, 8 grounds or 9 grounds in total of discrimination. So the fundamental thing is that a policy or a decision or a provision of an employer which on the face of it is apparently neutral and apparently benign, in fact when applied in the workplace is actually discriminatory in an indirect way. And that would be, as I say, if you take the example of somebody, an employer looking for people with 10 or 15 years of experience for a particular role, that doesn't appear to be discriminatory, but in fact it is indirectly discriminatory against people of a younger age because they simply wouldn't have as much chance of having acquired that sort of experience. The same applies in plenty of other situations. So direct discrimination is one thing, indirect discrimination is another thing. Both of them are contrary to the Employment Equality Act 1998, and indirect discrimination is a bit more subtle, but it does exist, and it is worth having a look at your case if you believe you're getting an unfair shake. You're not getting a fair shake, particularly if you're in a group of other people to whom a rule or a provision applies and it appears to be neutral, it appears to be non-discriminatory, it appears to be non-targeted, but in fact when the rule is applied it actually is far more likely to apply to a particular group of people, a group of people who may be or who have a protected characteristic, that is on family grounds or on sexual orientation grounds or on religious grounds or membership of the travelling community or whatever. Anyway, I hope you find this video useful. I'd appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot.